What I wanted to talk about today was spend 15, 20 minutes or so, what I call my 15 minutes of not fame, but 15 minutes of kind of random ramblings. You know, I have kind of an interesting seat as somebody who spent about 20 years building an ad agency and studying trends, and then about 4 or 5 years hosting a show on CNBC, The Big Idea, about success, interviewing tons of successful people, and now, excuse me, being part of the pop culture and being part of the media, somebody who gets to sit on Morning Joe once a week and do the professionals with my friend Star and Dr. Nancy on a Today Show a few days a week and other things. I kind of a front row seat to what's going on and the people and the places and politics and media. So I'm just going to share some of my observations about things. The topics I'm going to cover are the media in general, our next president, polls, television, the internet, kids, race, reality television, Facebook, politicians, and Democrats and Republicans. And we're going to cover that. And there's some interesting thoughts. You can agree, disagree. A couple of them sometimes I've said on TV. A few of them are just new things I've come up with. But the first one I want to talk about is what I call the media blame game. I can't tell you the amount of segments I'm asked to do on television or comment on as an image guy based on, okay, anorexia in our society is the media to blame, bullying is the media to blame, men's perceptions of women's, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of always say the same thing. I get very angry about that because as somebody that came from advertising, I always say about advertising, we don't drive society, we hold up a mirror. And when it comes to children's self-image, when it comes to health, when it comes to our perception of beauty, that starts at home with the parents. You know, I'm so tired of the media getting blamed for forming who we are. The media is part of who we are, but I've yet to see, as I've watched a lot of my friends raise kids, the parents that are on it and love them and with structure and discipline, the kids are not watching Jersey Shore and all of a sudden becoming like the situation. And the kids are not watching somebody doing drugs on TV and all of a sudden they're going to start doing drugs TV. They can distinguish between the images in front of them or what they see in magazines or aspirations or fantasies or reality versus what's right and wrong. So, you know, my pat answer when the media gets blamed for our human foibles and the ills of society, it's at home. And there's nothing that can't be controlled at home when it comes to your children that the media can do that is not in your power. So if there are any parents out here, I say that, and this is something I feel strongly about as far as the media getting blamed for things. You were supposed to applaud at that, by the way. Thank you. I mean, this is a media group, right? The second thing I want to talk about is our next president. It's very interesting because obviously, ad nauseum, what we've heard for the last 6 months, and we're going to hear for the next 6 months, is who's going to be our next president. Obviously, we know the two combatants right now, and I tend to like to look at, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. I like to look at things from up here. You can analyze things to death, but I see it very simple, and this is not my political view. I look at the last 100 years, and I say, okay, there have been two incumbents that have lost. And what happened those two times? And it was Bush Sr. and it was Jimmy Carter. And this goes back to FDR, and I'm not sure anything but what happened before FDR. And both times, two things were going on. The economy was going south dramatically, and you had a charismatic new contender, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton. And right now, we have neither of those two situations. So Barack Obama, pending anything major in the next 6 months, will be our next president. I can guarantee that. So that's just my thoughts as you hear everything else, because history repeats itself, and you got to look at 10,000 feet up. Obviously, the economy can start to fall apart. But if we're going as we're going, you're going to see 4 more years where the election on Obama, and I think he's going to win fairly handsomely in the Electoral College. So I think you can write that down. The third, by the way, I wrote a book called Often Wrong, Never in Doubt. So just for the record, as I talk along here, okay? Which, by the way, and I say this with all my esteemed media colleagues here, is the concept about talking heads on television. All the experts, nobody knows what they're talking about. And it's just the ones who say it and they stick their chin out. And if you really watch what's going on TV, I'm not saying people aren't smart, but it's kind of, anybody could get up there and say these things. Nobody's saying something so prolific. Nobody obviously has the answer. So that's my theory. Next thing, polls. I think polls are bipolar. I think polls are a dating thing. It was very interesting. If you study what happened during the Republican face-off of the last 6 months, the poll you had, obviously, we saw what happened. You had Trump on top of the polls. You had Herman Cain on top of the polls. You had Bachmann on top of the polls. And all that was viewers wanting the show to go on. I really believe that. When people are filling out polls, it's not as much of who are you going to really vote for president, who do you want to see in the show? And I think that's what happened. I think everybody knew what was going to happen. It was going to end up at Romney, but a lot more fun to have Herman Cain around for a while. A lot more fun, literally, because it's hard to distinguish now between politics and the media. They're one and the same. And I'm not saying that glibly. I think that that's reality. So I think you have to be careful. And now all of us on the polls show we're going to be 2 points apart, and that's going to be but in reality, 20% of this country was never voting for Donald Trump. You know, think about that. Think about the reality of that. Trump was ahead of all these other candidates. And Donald's a friend of mine, but that was never going to happen. There aren't a lot of sane people who are going to go and vote for Donald Trump. So we have to distinguish, and I say that with great love and affection, we have to distinguish between polls and people wanting to watch the show.